This is not an average spin-off. Minecraft Dungeons, as many people have already called it, is basically Diablo Light, and that is, I think, a very fair comparison. But there are obviously some differences. Probably most notably of all, obviously, you're not fighting a demon of the underworld. There's not going to be blood and guts flying around everywhere, and it's not quite as dark and depraved. But that's completely fine because it's essentially a dungeon crawler for the family, and that absolutely suits the Minecraft ethos. As does the aesthetical changes you can see here, the very blocky style, the musical 8-bit sounds that really you know and love and resonate from those who've played Minecraft and even those who haven't. And of course you also get to see the types of creatures that are familiar in that universe, like the zombies you can see on the screen there. There are also the creepers and the endermen, all those kind of creatures and characters that you've come to know and love. And you can even customize your character to suit the kind of character you know and recognize from Minecraft. But there are obviously some big differences to this as well. And as I've mentioned, obviously this is not a blood font, you're not going to be killing all kinds of demons from the underworld, but it is a mechanically solid, multiplayer stable and lovingly polished game. And I think it's quite interesting because you look at what Microsoft have done since they've bought out Minecraft, and they've really treated this as, I guess you could say, it's almost like their Lego, right? I mean, it's almost like Disney treating one of their intellectual properties. They've really looked after and nourished Minecraft. Obviously, when you've looked at how they've introduced like ray tracing and all these massive aesthetical changes to the base game to really kind of bring what seems quite a dated engine and really bring it up to the 21st century using all the modern technology. And I think what you're seeing with Minecraft Dungeons is again another step towards that direction. And this is actually a very pretty game. I think if you look at the environments here, obviously you've got a nice contrast between the fire and the bushes, and you've got the lighting effects and the particle effects there, and obviously the characters, they're very familiar. The customization possibilities. This is all quite a nice design top-down game. It really looks exactly as you'd expect a top-down RPG adventure to look like in the Minecraft universe. And as I said, it all handles really well. As you can see from the combat here, you've got a nice evasion tactics, you've got a nice mix of enemies. Obviously the zombies come in for a close combat and attack, the skeletons use bow and arrow to come and fight you, and then you've got some really tough enemies to come later on as well, like you've got some big guardian mini boss types, and also you've got some of the very familiar types of enemies that are going to be pretty much a challenge in this as well. And of course, in typical Minecraft fare, you've got loot to gather, you've got different types of ammunition to get, there's all armor types, there's rares, there's everything you could know and love and recognize about Minecraft is here in some form or another. But Minecraft definitely has a suitable mix of the wholesome and the horrifying worlds to explore. So you're seeing this opening stage here is very much kind of, it's like an open door, almost like a garden essentially. So what you've got here as well, you've just seen that my character is leveled up. And this is quite an interesting thing. So an interesting point about Minecraft is that you don't actually level up as such in the traditional sense of the word. What basically happens is you gain an enchantment point every time that you gain a level in Minecraft Dungeons, and what you do then, you actually enchant either your weapon, your left hand or your right hand weapon, or your armor. Now you've got basically each kind of weapon has got its own kind of unique skill tree, so to speak, and you've only got 3 upgrade tiers per that skill tree. So basically once you make that initial decision, you have to keep upgrading that. The enchantment gems, obviously, as well, they only have, so the first stage is 1 enchantment gem, then it goes to 2, then it goes to 3. So you have to gradually build it up over a sustained period of time. You're not just going to be able to do it when you reach level 3. You're not going to be able to get each stage and tier of that item. But I think that's the really cool thing about this as well, is that you also get different weapons and armor to fight throughout. The one problem I did find with this is that I found that you were almost going through the armor and the weapons too quickly in some ways. I found that you could actually, by the time you've actually gotten accustomed and used to using the one weapon in your hand, you actually found something that's better than it. So obviously as you go between each level, obviously you'll be picking up different loot from, you're picking up from the corpus of enemies, you're picking them up from chests, getting them as mission rewards. And obviously there's another interesting element with this as well, is that you can actually increase the difficulty of each mission. And by in doing so, obviously you get rarer loot if you go for higher difficulties. So that does present an interesting conundrum when you're doing that. So obviously you want to try and, get the best loot possible. And to really sort of tackle those difficulty missions, you gain like a power level, which would be familiar again to people who dungeon crawlers. But essentially, like the higher capacity, the higher strength and well-being of each weapon that you have, then the more obviously that contributes to your overall power, and that means then you can then go and try some of the tougher difficulty settings. So you can see now I've just completed this initial level, and what's going to happen now, I'm going to set up a camp, and in this camp you're going to see how kind of it starts out very basically, but then over time it kind of grows. You'll get like hidden secrets in there, you'll get some possibilities for expansion in the future, which we'll talk about in a bit. These training dummies, which you can see here, which you can just hack and fight as much as you want. Now, the really interesting thing about this is sort of lending into what I was saying at the top of this about building. You start out, so you've got the mission select there, but eventually you'll get a blacksmith and a vendor come to join your camp. Now, what that means is the blacksmith essentially, you don't get a normal standardized shop that you would expect in RPG. So you can't just buy your potions, you can't just buy, anything, any different upgrades to your shield, etc. What actually happens is all the emeralds and the green emeralds you've been seeing me collecting this, and that comes from like killing enemies, that comes from looting corpses, that comes from also salvaging your weapons, which we'll get to in a second. But all those emeralds are basically used in a kind of like a lucky dip. And what happens is you trade in, I think it's about 85 emeralds at first with the blacksmith, and he will give you a likened weapon for your level. So it could be anything, right? You could literally get a left-hand weapon or a right-hand weapon, or you could get an armor piece. You don't actually know what you're going to get until you get it. And it's a really odd way of doing it. So like, obviously, like I think in standard RPGs, you're kind of used to saying, right, I've been saving up for this piece of armor or this weapon. I really want to go out and buy this. And so you do that. But in this, you could be getting literally something that's worse than what you've already got. And you're paying for that. So it's a really interesting dynamic that is a little bit frustrating, I would say, because I personally would like to be spending that on something I know that is going to be an upgrade for me. It almost makes it superfluous in some respects, because you know that if you go into the next level, you could essentially be getting an item that's better than what you already have anyway from a random drop or in a random chest that you just uncover. Who knows? But in some respects, it does make the blacksmith kind of superfluous to begin with, because you're wondering, well, why do I gamble on something that I'm just going to salvage? Now, what I mentioned about salvaging there as well is basically all the weapons and armor that you pick up over time. If it's of a lesser, basically if it's not really worth you, using that again, you can salvage those to get some more emeralds as a result of that. Now, if you've actually enchanted that armor piece or that weapon previously, you'll also get those enchantment points back, which is a good thing, because at first I was kind of worried that, you would enchant a weapon or a piece of armor, and then it would be a case of, well, you once you salvage it, you lose it all. So that isn't the case, which is a good thing. So basically, those enchantment points then do become sort of like an experience point to a degree, which you can then reinvest in something else, and there's no kind of additional cost to you for changing that around, which, as I said, is probably a good thing, because the amount of times you fluctuate between items and weapons in Minecraft Dungeons is quite rapid, I find, especially if you start climbing up the higher difficulties to challenge yourself. Because ultimately, and as you've seen here, I'm kind of flying through these levels a bit without really taking much damage. If you basically keep going at the same trajectory, you're not really challenging yourself too much, then actually the game can be very easy. So there's not really much... basically, if you don't allow yourself to kind of like challenge yourself just a little bit, you could really, really breeze through Minecraft Dungeons. So it's made to be a very accessible game, which is absolutely fine. But there is obviously a difficulty curve there, which you can use to kind of like for more experienced RPG hack and slash players. And as I say, the game does start a bit slow paced, so you got the zombies, you see lots of zombies, lots of skeletons on the screen, but you will start seeing more familiar Minecraft enemies over a period of time as well. But you obviously see like kind of the game's flair for creativity, with the backdrops and locations, and all presented in the franchise's kind of familiar blocky style. But as I've said, weirdly, I think that's really all the way you would differentiate that this is a Minecraft game, because going into the base aspect of it, I mean, for me, I would have loved to have been able to have built shops at my camp, or to be able to craft my own weapons, or to be able to start excavating areas within my camp. And I guess, that's not really what this game is. This game is essentially just, it's a hack and slash dungeon crawler. It's simplistic. You would switch off fun, just because obviously, it's got the Minecraft aesthetic. It doesn't actually mean that this needs to be Minecraft again, right? But just with Minecraft Diablo. It doesn't need to be that, but it does come with a degree of expectation. I guess you come into this, you feel like you might be able to do some of these things. I mean, you've got to look at it one way. Even Minecraft Story Mode had aspects where you were building things. And building is such a core component of the Minecraft franchise that it feels a very strange exclusion not to have it in some form in here. Having said that, you know, I really enjoyed this. I feel like I actually hope this becomes sort of a Pillarstone franchise for Microsoft, because for me, I think, you know, this can be built upon in exciting ways. You know, and I obviously they've announced there's going to be some DLC and further expansions with Minecraft Dungeons over time. They've mentioned there'll be crossplay and things like that, which is great. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of things they add in the DLC. And indeed, I feel like if they did decide to do like a Minecraft Dungeons 2, which I really hope they do, because I think there's a lot here that you'll enjoy and get a lot out of. It's rife for potential. There's a lot, you know. I think this could be a real. It's not just going to be a standard spin-off. I mean, the way I kind of look at it, if you think of the Pokemon games, right, you've got the mainline series, which people know and appreciate, you know, they wait for Gen 7, 8, etc. But then you've also got spin-offs like Mystery Dungeon, which is a massive franchise in of its own right now. You know, Pokemon Snap, which people love. I could see this being a similar case with Minecraft Dungeons. Like, it's essentially its own major spin-off, but it's also its own major franchise, and it has that kind of potential for the future. So even if this game doesn't include all the things I would love to see from a game of this type, I'm still very much enjoyed spending the time with it. So I haven't really talked about the relics either. So obviously I've mentioned that, you know, you've got the armor and the weapons on the left and on the right hand side, but then you also get these relics which you can use. So basically you can get a totem which kind of increases your buffs. You can get a feather which increases your speed and duration. There's also a wolf you can summon to your side, and there are just many things you can use. But you pick these up over a period of time as well, and you can choose what to equip at any given time. And also as well, you can see I've got a big health bar in the middle there. So I might get a sort of a regenerating potion, which I can use to keep regenerating my health. And yeah, it's all the basic stuff that you would expect from a hack and slash dungeon crawler, but it's also very family friendly and accessible. And of course, it has local co-op, so you can play it with, you know, in the split screen. There is online co-op as well, which works really well. And as I mentioned as well, there is due to be cross-platform as well. So this is actually not just an Xbox and PC title; it's out on Switch and PS4 as well. So, you know, it's one of those games that I think is just going to keep, you know, adding value over time as well. And the best part of it as well, if you've got Xbox Game Pass, you can literally download and play this right now for free. You don't even need to pay for it. I mean, that is the beauty of games coming, you know, new franchises coming on Xbox Game Pass. I mean, they are available right now to you. You can just download it straight to your laptop or download to your Xbox, and away you go. And I think that should obviously help the game's kind of, you know, community, and, you know, it should obviously help with the game. You know, that should obviously make sure you've got constant ability to play with friends, and there's always someone to be able to jump into a game with as well, which is great for, you know, these types of games. Sometimes, you know, the community aspect can die out very quickly, but with this being on Game Pass, I would assume that's probably not going to be the case. So yeah, I mean, there's just some weird things in this game. Like, obviously not being able to craft your own items is a bit of a myth. I'm a bit gutted about that, to be honest with you. That would make a lot of sense to do that in Minecraft. Obviously being able to build your own campsite, you know, craft it the way you see fit would have been a lot of fun. But I do think that the game itself handles very well. It's very enjoyable. There's a lot to it still. Obviously there's secret areas, there's secret side missions you can take on, so you don't just have to follow the story. So you know, there's lots of different you know, familiar areas to Minecraft fans as well, like this crypt, for instance. This will probably look quite familiar in some respects, you know, the way that things that people create within Minecraft. It's just a very simple but effective game, I think. You know, it's one that I can find myself dipping in and out of over time. Obviously, as I mentioned, there's a lot of DLC coming, so we'll be covering that. We've got access to the Hero Pass, so that's definitely going to be worth staying tuned for us for that as we look at the future content that comes to the game. Obviously, there's different charms you can use, different weapons that are going to be available to you. and it's just weirdly, I just really liked it, and I really like the fact that, you know, that this essentially is just Diablo for families, which is great. I mean, obviously you can see that I've got a TNT over my head as well. You actually get some kind of random pieces you can pick up in the environment, so you can throw that TNT into a block of enemies and blow them up into one big mash. You know, there's all kinds of things you can pick up throughout the game. I think obviously as well, it's worth bearing in mind that even though I've said it's a bit of a breeze early on, there is some tough battles coming on, and you really will find the difficulty curve can be quite challenging if you allow it to be. But I think the point is you're always in control of that, right? So I think as long as you realize you can control the game, you can control it to your own difficulty and what makes sense to you and what feels comfortable to you, that's the beauty of Minecraft Dungeons. It always feels like it's in your control, and that's the great thing about it. So, I mean, for me, the key thing is, you know, wherever you choose to play it, this is a healthy, entertaining introduction to one of gaming's most fulfilling and rich genres. And whether you played Minecraft or not before, it doesn't really matter. I think this is just a very polished, very entertaining dungeon crawler that you'll enjoy spending a lot of time with. Yeah, but that's going to do it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed the first look at Minecraft Dungeons, and obviously as well, if you've got this on Xbox Game Pass, do make sure to download it. You really won't regret it. And it's also, even if you don't, I mean, it's still relatively cheap on all the different formats that it's available on. I say you can get this on Switch. I feel for me this is a perfect Switch title. You know, this is the kind of thing I would love to be playing in bed and just chilling out. But yeah, this has been Minecraft Dungeons. I hope you've enjoyed it, and there's plenty of videos on the channel, so stay tuned and stick around. And as mentioned, we'll be looking at the Hero Pass as well, so when that content releases and content updates come out, be sure to stay tuned to the channel because we'll be covering those as well. But thanks for joining us. See you for the next one.